Coming up, meet the first Indigenous woman to play professional soccer. The Secretary of Education travels to New Mexico. Plus, a children's book author honors her parents, and let's dance. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
Arizona is home to 22 tribal nations and more than 340,000 Native Americans. Arizona State University builds on more than 6 decades of working and partnering with tribal nations and communities. Many of our Native faculty incorporate Indigenous knowledge systems in seeking solutions through a process of community engagement that respects and honors traditional ways of thinking. Together, we are creating community solutions leading to a more equitable future.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Guwatsi Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We start in the Southwest, where one of Indian country's biggest celebrations is returning in person.
Give a shout. Let's hear it. Call the dancers. Call the dancers. These dancers are yours. Call them out.
Albuquerque, New Mexico is once again playing host to the Gathering of Nations powwow. You can expect to see Indigenous music and competitive dancing, both traditional and modern, as well as the return of the horse parade. The event went virtual for 2 years due to the coronavirus pandemic. To help keep people safe this year, the powwow is including guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Vaccines and masks are not required, but are recommended. Organizers say they expect a strong return to what is billed as one of the largest annual gatherings of Native people in the United States. Founder of the event, Derek Matthews, said his team is working hard to make the celebration a memorable one. And the Gathering of Nations runs through Saturday, April 30th. An independent review of the arrest of Maxwell Johnson and his young granddaughter Tori found that 2 officers arrested and handcuffed the pair without reasonable and probable grounds. APTN's Tina House has more.
It all began on December the 20th, 2019, when Maxwell Johnson Sr. and his 12-year-old granddaughter from the Heiltsuk Nation went to the Bank of Montreal in downtown Vancouver to open up her first bank account. It should have been a routine experience, but Maxwell says things went awry when he presented their federally issued status cards to the bank teller.
She said, sorry, but at this time we can't issue a card for your granddaughter right now. She said, come upstairs and you guys will get your status cards back.
Johnson says that after waiting upstairs for a half an hour, Tori saw 2 police officers approaching them.
She said, Papa, one of these guys are for us. I kind of laughed and I said, I don't think so. And sure enough, they came over, grabbed Tori and myself, walked us outside, turned us around, handcuffed us, told us we weren't under arrest, but we were detained, and then they read us our rights.
Despite Vancouver Police Chief Adam Palmer stating that the officers operated in standard operating procedure, a tribunal led by retired Judge Brian Neal has ruled that the 2 officers have committed professional misconduct by recklessly arresting Mr. Johnson and his granddaughter without good and sufficient cause, and recklessly using unnecessary force on Mr. Johnson and his granddaughter by applying handcuffs to the parties on arrest without good and sufficient cause. They further stated that handcuffing a 12-year-old child is inexcusable. Maxwell Johnson Sr. joined us by Zoom from his home in Bella Bella after hearing the decision.
I know they have a job to do, and doing it the way they did, it was just right. It wasn't right.
The tribunal ordered the officers be suspended for several days, that they complete intensive, immersive Indigenous cultural sensitivity training, and that they complete retraining and de-escalation skills, risk assessment, and power of arrest. The tribunal also ordered the officers to provide a written apology and offer to meet to listen to concerns and give an oral apology.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming to get this decision, and we're all really happy at where it's going now.
Since this incident took place, Maxwell Johnson Sr. and his granddaughter have filed human rights complaints, and the Heiltsuk Nation has offered a chance for the officers to attend a healing ceremony in Bella Bella in the near future. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Well, it's election season on the Navajo Nation, and already several candidates have announced their bid for president. The tribe is one of the largest Indigenous nations in the country. It's no surprise that current Navajo President Jonathan Nez is running for re-election. His term has been largely dominated by the coronavirus pandemic. Boo Van Nygren was the first to declare his bid for presidency. He ran in the last election as vice president to Joe Shirley. Other candidates include former Navajo Nation Attorney General Ethel Branch, who founded the Navajo and Hopi COVID-19 Relief Fund. Earl El Sombrero is a newcomer to the race. He is the manager of the Inscription House chapter in Arizona. The primary election is August 2nd, and the top two vote-getters will move to November's general election. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, Ojibwe artists are honored and Dr. Miguel Cardona visits New Mexico. Plus, a professional soccer player makes history. But first, a Lakota storyteller shares her vision with young readers. We'll be right back. In 2017, Jessie Taken Alive Rencounter won the Great Plains Emerging Tribal Writer Award for her first book, Petha Shows Misu the Light. Since then, she has published 3 more children's books.
I work as a school counselor, and I had a lot of kids come in and ask some really difficult questions that sometimes we're not trained as school counselors to answer. The difficult questions that sometimes even adults we ask of, why do people do hurtful things, right? And so being Lakota and being Indigenous, we've always been taught to ask for guidance, and those answers come to us. And so I asked for guidance in my work with these children. And believe it or not, I had a very beautiful, empowering dream where an old man came to me and shared a message with me. And I just started sharing this message and created a story from it because I love storytelling. And parents and grandparents would ask, where did you get that book? And so I just kept telling them, I was like, it's not a book. And so I was encouraged to write that book, and I finally wrote it and was amazed at all the support and excitement around it.
Taken Alive Rencounter incorporates Lakota culture and language in her children's books.
Our cultures, no matter where we are from, have always been based on storytelling. And that's how we passed on values to our children. Whether it was on the plains regions, children sitting around the fire in the teepee, hearing the stories from their parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents. These have always been a way to teach, to share history and such. And so knowing that a lot of this has been kind of going away, sharing these values through a cultural lens. Because of the fast-paced society, I thought, you know what? Why not write a story, write books, children's books with cultural values in them? Because children are going to be reading anyway, whether they're at school or at home. And so I think it's very important to incorporate 2 worlds into what we have today right now with this fast-paced society that we lived in, but still incorporating those cultural values. We don't ever want to lose sense of who we are as Indigenous peoples.
Her latest book is called Rainbows in December.
Rainbows in December actually was born out of my own grief. I'm losing both my parents within 33 days of each other due to COVID in late November and December of 2020, and dealing with my own grief. And I realized that historically, a lot of our Indigenous cultures really talked about the process of birth and death, how it's natural. And I realized that in our society today, it's almost like taboo to talk about that. And so also experiencing as a school counselor, knowing that so many kids came in not knowing how to deal with that grief, I wanted to write a book in honor of my parents and their grieving, and also how to teach how to deal with the grief, but also how to honor someone's legacy that has now passed on into the spirit world. So Rainbows in December actually came about of me being a little girl and being fascinated with rainbows, and my dad always talking about how we're going to find the magic in the rainbow at the end of the rainbow. And we chased a rainbow one day when I was a little girl across the pasture and in our field in the country. And, we didn't get to the end of the rainbow, of course. And I was so sad. And later as a young woman, my dad would always tell me, says, "You're the magic and the rainbow. You're that magic." And so on the day of the double burial of my parents, on our way going back to their house, after we had laid their physical bodies back to Mother Earth, it was super cold up in North Dakota and freezing. And all of a sudden, I'm watching out the window and this beautiful rainbow stretches across the sky. And immediately I knew that was my dad. My dad and my mom showing me we're okay and things are going to be okay.
It's not every day that a cabinet secretary travels to tribal lands. That was the case last week when U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona traveled to New Mexico. There, he met with students at the Santa Fe High School and Jemez Pueblo. Cardona said his message to students and educators is simple, that their voices are important.
We could talk about policy all day in D.C., but when you talk to students and when you talk to educators and when you see it firsthand, it just really reminds us of how important it is to hear from students and to listen to their perspective on how they're coming back from the pandemic and what their needs are. What I heard loud and clear from these high school students was the importance and the need for mental health supports. Each student shared examples of how their lives have changed over the last 2 years. And almost every student said that the emotional recovery is something that they're more focused on right now than the academic recovery. So that's from the mouth of students. They said, I'll learn better when I feel better. And so then I saw down the hall, I saw a public-private partnership where we have mental health experts and behavioral health experts who are partnering with the school. So it's a private Presbyterian mental health services. They're set up in the school. So there's a good partnership there so that our school counselors could support our students with school-related topics, and our the counselors that are connected to the schools can help with other more deeper or more family-based issues. But it was a great network here of support for students. And then the last thing I'll share is I visited a program where high school students, student governance leaders were putting together a food drive because so many families post-pandemic, because this is a tourist economy, so many families were left without work, without income, and students are leading this effort to make sure that food insecurity is addressed. So I'm inspired by these students. I heard them, they need more, and I'm thankful that the American Rescue Plan is there to provide some of the funds that they need to get these programs in place.
Santa Fe High School students told Cardona the struggles they faced during the pandemic.
I spoke to a student a couple hours ago who told me his mother died during the pandemic. I spoke to another student who said a good friend of his was murdered during the pandemic. And these students are, their support comes from programs within the schools. And, you know, when we talk about the American Rescue Plan and we talk about social emotional well-being, it includes support for students who are having ideation. As a matter of fact, one of the directors of the community-based program that's housed in the school talked a lot about suicide prevention and about how this team that's set up, and they have offices in Santa Fe High School, they can respond to students within an hour if any concerns are brought up. So, you know, typically you think, well, a parent will take a child to and they'll make an appointment and they'll try to get seen soon. Within an hour, the students at Santa Fe High School have access to a mental health professional if they have ideations. And that's what's possible with the American Rescue Plan. That's what's possible when we reimagine education and think of social emotional well-being as much as we think of academic success.
Cardona believes traditional values can help keep children safe.
You know, it reminds me a lot of conversations I've had with Native Americans who understand, they've understood forever that you need to start with it's the whole child, that we need to think of mind, body, spirit, everything. And that's what I heard today from our students.
Step into the world of someone who is disabled. That is the challenge presented at the 18th Annual American Indian Disability Summit held in Phoenix earlier this month. ICT's Patty Tholahongba reports.
According to a report by the Arizona Indian Education, around 16% of Native American students, K through 12, are classified as students with a disability, compared to 13% of students from other ethnicities. Gerald Joseph was the keynote speaker, and he's an expert in special education.
In Indigenous communities, you will find oftentimes that we don't have a term for disability, right? Disability is a Western construct.
So he never looked at his brother as being disabled, yet his brother was deaf. He was sent 340 miles away to a boarding school for the deaf because the Hopi tribe didn't have the educational services to teach someone who was deaf. Joseph says it was the same as when the government took Native children from their homes and sent them to boarding schools. His brother was removed from his family, his clan, and his community.
Bubba says he remembers covering his head with a pillow because the crying wouldn't stop.
The conference theme, Gathering Native Voices to Build Strength Through Unity, is what this group is trying to build. Rosalie Perry says she's lucky. Her tribal community has paved sidewalks and well-lit roads. She drives her own car and is able to be independent.
But for people with disabilities and others that have difficulties with transportation, this is a real issue, especially in other tribal lands.
There are success stories. Through the years, youth have attended this summit and now return as adults.
They're actually working. They have leadership skills developed through some of the programs and the resources that we have here in this room today. They have jobs. They have families.
Still, they all agree that tribes must address the needs of the disabled community as they look at tribal nation building. In Tempe, Arizona, Patty Tolahungva, ICT News.
Red Lake Ojibwe painter Robert Desjardins focuses on Ojibwe family life, and after battling cancer twice, he's become a huge advocate for physical and spiritual health. Robert's father, Patrick, left a long-standing legacy with the creation of Mia, the Indian maiden that adorned the Land O'Lakes butter package for decades. The company discontinued that packaging in 2020. His father gave him a foundation to find his own voice through art.
I wanted to develop my own imagery. So that was one of the things I had to kind of struggle with at first. I guess it was kind of natural to kind of integrate some of this imagery into my art. But for me, it was a process of trying to get away from that. And I think today, the art that I do now is, you don't see a lot of that influence.
Desjardins is a familiar figure on the powwow trail.
Oh, I love dancing. Actually, I started dancing after I stopped using drugs and alcohol, and that was in 1982. And I began dancing in probably about 1985, and so I've danced ever since then. But one thing about dancing is going into other communities and meeting other people, and also dancing is it's one of the subjects of my art. It's one of the things that I paint is dancing.
Aspen, Colorado is home to the world-renowned Aspen Institute. Its annual Ideas Festival is dedicated to improving the world. Though the Colorado ski town is synonymous with ideas, Indigenous worldviews are not always centered. Stuart Huntington takes a look at local efforts to change that.
Tribal members from hundreds of miles around gathered last weekend at the Aspen High School for a powwow. It was the latest example of efforts by the Aspen Indigenous Foundation to reintroduce a Native presence to the Roaring Fork Valley.
That's what we're trying to do with this powwow here. We're trying to grow the whole ecosystem of Indigenous thought.
The Shining Mountains Easter Powwow is new, and plans are for it to be an annual event. Some observers welcomed it, calling the Native presence locally insufficient.
Most of the time when we do a historical retrospective of Aspen, it always starts with ski time, when in actuality it was much older than that. And I think having the kids have an opportunity to see what the real history of the valley looks like, it's a great start. We have a lot of work to do.
Others welcomed the powwow and took a longer view. Reginald Lopez came to the powwow from the nearby Ute Mountain Ute Reservation.
This is an area that's pretty sacred to us.
Lopez praised the efforts to increase Native presence in his homeland, but stressed that it never left.
It always has been here. So we always say the spirit is here and it will always stay here. Look at what is happening now. Some spirit came and gone to somebody's head and brought these people back here again. You cannot always take from earth. You have to give back.
In Aspen, Colorado, Stuart Huntington, ICT.
Madison Hammond is a trailblazer. She is the first Indigenous player in the National Women's Soccer League. Madison started her career in 2020 playing for the OL Reign, and before that she played collegiately at Wake Forest University. She is currently a defender for Angel City FC, which is based in Los Angeles, California.
I think that playing professional soccer was something that was a result of the process, and playing soccer for so long. I'm just such a competitive person, and soccer and sport in general was just something that was part of my family and kind of brought us closer together. And so as I started playing collegiately, I'm very competitive. And so in my mind, I was like, why would I stop? Why would I stop after I graduate? And so that pursuit of playing professionally was kind of driven by that competitive spirit, but also the support of my family to just be like, why not?
Hammond is the first Native American to play professional women's soccer.
I made sure everyone fact checked first. I was like, there's no way. And for me, just my journey and being the first Indigenous soccer player in the NWSL, it's been a real honor. It's been a real opportunity. And the best part is just when little girls come see me at the end of the games and they're like, I'm Native American too. And being able to celebrate that sense of pride in our identity is something that I really cherish. It's for me, that's kind of what drives me every day. And I love that I have this role of being an inspiration and being a role model and being somebody that people are supposed to look up to, because I didn't have that when I was growing up. I looked up to male footballers. I looked up to male athletes. And so being able to be here now and use my platform for that positive inspiration and positive reinforcement is something that's really important in Indigenous communities in particular. And so I'm very excited and really grateful to be part of that.
Hammond's career has kept her away from her Pueblo's feast day.
I am very happy to say that this will be the first year I'll be able to go back for my feast day in probably, I was trying to do the math the other day, it's got to be at least 10 years. And it's, well, one, it's been canceled the past 3 years because of COVID. And I'm so excited that I get to go back, and, you know, it's going to be a little bit different just because we are still in the pandemic as we're speaking, but I'm just so grateful that I get to go back this year because, and I was thinking back to why I haven't been back, and it's literally been because of soccer. And I've always had tournaments and I've always been in school, and like this week is usually the finals week in college. So I couldn't do that for 4 years. And so I didn't realize how much I took for granted being able to participate when I was younger because it was kind of a given. And so this year I'm really excited. I'm not gonna be able to participate, but I will be there with my family, which will be really exciting.
The U.S. Postal Service is honoring the life and work of Ojibwe citizen George Morrison by using his art on stamps. 5 of his landscape paintings are included in the spring 2022 release. A painter and sculptor, he is known as the founder of Native American modernism. Morrison was a teacher and mentor to many, including ICT producer and award-winning poet Vincent Moniz. He brings us this tribute.
Braided and unbranded. Can hear it all from this cove. Slap of tire to slick tar, laugh, yell, fight, and piss into mirrors of our own reflection. Family of rain has come. They keep painting. Rainwater ancestors share their songs, use the watchful eye of the Morrison as their drum. Crow hop to fancy shawl, every change up a new opportunity to dance, and they do. In motions that hurt my descendants' knees and ankles, I write, and they paint. Whirlpool of our mini cosmos, and we are in its eye. Not quiet, not quite safe, but it's here, and so are we. old scars, bits of shoe scuff wiped off with water that washes away the old count one beat at a time. Every kind of siren screams, rips through the Ave. These alarms bounce off 11 railroad ties used as steps away and up, back into a pulse of us. This is a loop in time where everyone I've ever met walks by, old, young, dead, or alive. They wave and give me the good trade salute. They keep painting. The story, only partly written down, is coming out of their aerosol-filled fingertips. Members of the community stop and tease, fill this tiny space with together, and then gone.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.